Bet on me, bet on myself. Feel good waking up whenever I want to. Feel good not sleeping in cause shit to do. Feel good doing what I want when I want to. Bet on me, bet on myself.
I'm K.O.J.I. This is Think Peace, brought to you by New Wave TV. WaveRunners. Let's get into it.
Well, this was a big one, wasn't it? This was a big decision. An amazing decision, one that we're very happy about. This morning, the Supreme Court has delivered a monumental victory for the Constitution, the separation of powers, and the rule of law in striking down the excessive use of nationwide injunctions to interfere with the normal functioning of the executive branch. The Supreme Court has stopped the presidency itself. That's what they've done. And really, it's been an amazing period of time. This last hour, there are people elated all over the country. I've seen such.
So first thing that comes to mind, and I actually had this conversation today, and just to make it clear, I don't vote. I don't get involved with the politics. I'm not pro this side or that side, but I understand it. To me, it's a sign of the times meter, if that makes sense. So yeah, I just want to make that clear. But my people, a lot of people, there's like polarizing feelings about this man right here.
Well, no shit.
I think it's all based on like, I don't want to say an emotional thing, that's too easy to say, but I think it's all based on a surface level under an understanding of what's really taking place. Whenever Obama was in the seat, things were like really chaotic. There was a height of social media police brutality. I think the Dylan Roof thing happened. He came out and made some comments in support of the LGBT community. He bombed countries, destabilized countries that were like in position, leading the movement to basically keep all of the resources that were being extracted within the country to make sure they actually benefit from it. So all of these things that, in the larger scale of things, from my perspective, was the term actually like more destructive or productive? I think it was a lot more destructive. My point is, the number one thing you would hear on the base level is, well, everything he tries to do, it gets blocked. They won't let him do anything. But when I would ask questions like, well, what is he trying to do? Nobody could ever tell me. That was just like the narrative, you know? And I'm not bashing anything. It's just, if you're gonna be for something, pledge your allegiance to something, you probably should know thoroughly the ins and outs of what's going on. So this first thing that he's saying, I instantly think all of the grace that was given to the former, if anything, it would be better suited for now, because the transparency of what he's actually fighting for, or what the direction, the things that he's bringing to the light or saying, it benefits you, whether you understand it or not. We're gonna find out things as they go on. Isn't that something that you would extend your grace for, and not all of the other stuff that kind of have us all over the place?
Such happiness and spirit. Sometimes you don't see that, but this case is very important. I was elected on a historic mandate, but in recent months we've seen a handful of radical left judges effectively try to overrule the rightful powers of the president to stop the American people from getting the policies that they voted for in record numbers. It was a grave threat to democracy, frankly, and instead of merely ruling on the immediate cases before them, these judges have attempted to dictate the law for the entire nation.
All right, so going back a little bit, he said, and this is where like the Trump thing kind of gets like confusing if you let it, but he said people are happy. What is it? Are the people that voted for him upset with him? Because I thought that was the narrative. Everybody was upset because of what was going on. I hear things like DEI and the ICE thing. From what I understood, it was like people were disappointed because he wasn't doing exactly what they thought he would be doing. I guess that's that whole Gemini effect. I always say this presidency thing was no different than record sales or being an artist. You know, you got some people that go so far as putting a diaper on in public to get attention, and then they drop an album. You know, that goes deep of all the things you do. So this was no different. Like, maybe he was saying certain things to prey on a certain crowd because he knew that it was untapped and they would show up and show out. They felt underrepresented. But that's like business and marketing and all of that. I always, from the outside looking in, it seemed like he did that to get in position, but then when he got there, he was actually doing things that would benefit the people. So who exactly is happy? Like, is that one of his delusions where he's kind of speaking it into existence? Well, what's really going on?
In practice, this meant that if any one of the nearly 700 federal judges disagreed with the policy of a duly elected president of the United States, he or she could block that policy from going into effect, or at least delay it for many years, tie it up in the court system. This was a colossal abuse of power which never occurred in American history prior to recent decades, and we've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it.
Again, is this more of his delusion or is this actually true? Because when I do hear him talk, he's always the first or the most sought after. And it could be factual because it seems like he is actually doing things that's not of the status quo, or other terms just kind of went along with this weird direction. And he mentioned those judges, the way that it was set up and the abuses of power and everything. Can we believe this? You know what I mean? I just think that overall, there's a source, there's a creator, there's beings that are probably here now, and they're using him to do things that need to be done. I'm gonna let it ride.
But more than the entire 20th century, I'm grateful to the Supreme Court for stepping in and solving this very, very big and complex problem, and they've made it very simple. I want to thank Justice Barrett, who wrote the opinion brilliantly, as well as Chief Justice Roberts and Justices Alito, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Great people. Thanks for this decision, and thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file and proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves.
All right, so how I look at this, because of where the collective consciousness is, the puppet masters may have to have him say the babies of slaves. But if you have been off the mainstream and doing your own research and being caught up by the Holy Spirit, really, really on that, not, the surface commercial cookie cutter type ways, you kind of understand by now that the whole out of Africa thing, all of us came from over there. And, they always say it in certain things, like our history didn't start with slavery, but that doesn't mean that we were necessarily all slaves or slaves. You just have to go there and open your mind and see what comes to you. So long story short, we're more like prisoners of war. When this thing really gets down deep into it, and he's saying that more policies need to come out, if it goes according to prophecy in the script, a lot of people gonna be shocked. The people who this is affecting, I think a lot of people are comfortable and they think that, that's who needs to go. But I think this thing is it depends on us too. If we ask the right questions, like, they're targeting, I saw Haitians, the Spanish or the Mexican community. But when this thing keeps going, this thing ending birthright citizenship, that's how a lot of these colonizers got here. And I always wonder, like, why don't we ask them? They can patrol borders, they can tell people they don't belong and go back here. Even your story tells us that you came over here, you interrupted people that were here, but somehow we just continue to roll like you discovered something. That's why every time y'all see stuff that says founded in 1823, they did just that. They founded things that were here. And that is the part that me and you have to do on our own. everybody's going to be led in a different direction, but there's a lot to uncover. So I'm saying all of this to say, even the people that we have allowed to slide historically, I'll say that, it's gonna keep winding down to you too, because that's how you got here and claim certain titles and positions of power and get to masquerade as, while completely giving a whole different narrative to a group of people that actually are. That's what's happening. That's really what's happening. Let's keep going.
It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. This was, in fact, it was the same date, the exact same date, the end of the Civil War. It was meant for the babies of slaves, and it's so clean and so obvious. But this lets us go there and finally win that case, because hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason.
And it's so crazy because down on the bottom, the surface, we all know that it just seems like any and everybody can come here and just have it relatively overnight, you know? And that's odd. It only makes sense. You know, you hear things like the stone that the builder refused should be the head cornerstone. Shout out to Bob Marley. This is an example of that. The people that were constantly ridiculed or looked at or set apart negatively from the whole parade that everybody was having on our land, prisoner of war now, the whole story wasn't told, on our land, watching everybody else benefit. I mean, in real time, I grew up on this island, and it's not easy just watching people just pop up and totally change the landscape of what made this place home. That's gonna be paid for. That's gonna be paid for. So Psalms 83, I believe, the crafty counsel, they were confederate against the people. That's another thing. You gotta understand it. The good book was addressing one group of people. Now, whether we are those people or on the outside of those things, because the whole Antichrist thing, he's kind of playing that role, and you gotta be careful because, you know, there's puppeteers that could very well be trying to enact the prophecy so it satisfies something, but then again, it could be just, this is what's happening. But it says something along the lines like he will get the people's favor, and then they'll want him back and all of that, and the wound on the eye, the head area, the bullet he dodged allegedly, he fits that narrative. So what this is sounding like to me is that's over with now. Everybody that was benefiting from that is now under siege as far as the birthright citizenship, because if your people came over here, which it's another video I gotta get to where this sister breaks it down magnificently. The civil rights movement actually opened the floodgates for all other minority groups to enter into the country. This fits along the same veins. I don't think that was meant for that, but that was the code that was kept, as long as everybody got along with the get along to oppress these people or keep these secrets and, you know, just keep going. The Asian restaurants, this is just what I'm thinking, I'm wondering. The Indian stores, all these different people that have these businesses in our communities that benefit. You came over here on this premise that he's basically saying is over. So I'm interested in those other policies that he's saying now can be fully enacted on.
So thanks to this decision, we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies of those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
When he said the refugee resettlement, I don't know, I always had a theory in the back of my mind, right? When you really do some research and you get into things like birth rates and everything, you see and you come across information that suggests that there are certain groups whose rates are declining, right? And we know the extent that these people will go to orchestrate wars for certain purposes and agendas that they have. So the Ukrainian thing, and this happened to me because like I remember going to Publix, and I'm just putting this together from the surface, but the thought, I appreciate the thought process, the awareness. I went to Publix or whatever, and the woman that was working at the register, she looked like, you know, she looked like she fit the scene or whatever, but when she began to talk, she couldn't even talk. It was like she had like a Russian accent, like, you know, speaking on. I was like, this is at Publix. But this was in lieu of the whole Ukrainian thing and all of that. And I just began to wonder. I wonder if that was just a front, because we know what's going on out here. You say birth rates are declining, but there's like 30,000 people that move here a month or something crazy like that. And it's just where I'm at. These people they just pop up, like they're just computer generated or whatever. So I was wondering if they do stuff like that, long story short, to reintroduce certain genetics into the gene pool to try to make up for that deficit. And it's just crazy. Again, we feel like we're owed something in the form of reparations. I think they play a game with us with the titles like Black and African American and slaves. I think that I always use this as an example. If the land was written and left to John, per se, and somehow, some way, Jimmy makes John thinks that his name is Jimmy, and he forgets that his name is John, and now this person who is Jimmy is saying his name is John, is now walking around parading as and operating as.
This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud.
I wonder about that, like if that's what they really did. But it's crazy when you see like all this aid going out to countries like Ukraine and all of that. But let's just say if it's a country like Haiti, for example, like we do bare minimum. Even Mexico, there's things going on down there that, like, sure, they could use a boost. And how about the people who we're now discovering are indigenous or native to this land that you've been telling they come a world over? Like, how about we start there? Like, why is it so easy to give billions to Ukraine? Like, I think it's all a money laundering thing. Like, for real, in a genetic repooling type of thing. He mentioned something about ending the funding for transgender surgeries and stuff. My mind thinks, how many people even knew that was happening? When we get mad or when I hear people that are upset, they like to reference things like my taxpayer dollars are paying for this. Maybe like the lack of better roads or things like this. Like, where's this money going? Like, how many people knew? Because I never heard that before. I didn't know it. I'm more like a macro. I just look at what's going on. And I don't know the inner details as much as I know others do. But who knew that? Who knew that taxpayer dollars were funding transgender surgeries? And what else along those lines? So that's when I go back to my original point about the grace that was given to one term or other terms that, when you look at it, didn't do us a whole lot of good. Whereas you may not like this person, but if you're able to get out of the person thing and realize that the same God a lot of people claim, who's always in control, controls the left and the right hand side, as is written in the good book. So get over the surface. Who cares about who's saying it? Listen to what's being said and what's being fought for and what's being laid in place. I think a lot of people aren't, like I said before, like they're not hip on what's really going on. A lot of people still identify as Black, African American, and all these false terms, and that extends out to everybody who's claiming a term or a nationality. It's under question now, because if you're on the right wave, you'll kind of you piece it together that this was all certain kind of people here. Russia revealed who the Christ looks like. Mexico came out and the president came out and said that before any Spaniard got there, that there were so-called Black people there. This is, if you look on, this is what you'll uncover on every landmass. So I think once we get out of that and get on the right wave, these things will make a different kind of sense to you. You won't be caught in the let's call it the third dimension understanding of these things. You won't catch feelings on who's doing what. You just know the spirit is moving and fulfilling prophecy. And a lot of people won't even know what to look for. I haven't seen the movie, but my homie told me that in that movie, certain people got burnt up in a certain amount of a certain people burnt up with them. It reminded me of a script that says something like, though hand join in hand, the wicked won't prosper, or something like that. Basically, like, you can perish for a lack of knowledge, quite frankly, by not understanding who you are, who they are, and what's actually being played out, what's at stake.
That dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
You know, if you're still calling yourself by the byword that Deuteronomy lists out as a punishment for disobedience, you'd understand why they change our name every decade or so. Negro, African-American, Afro-American, colored. But a so-called German man is just a German man. They will tell you what's his tribe. An African man is an African man within a country. They could identify with tribes. I think that was a key component in getting us in this psychosis, or this mental slumber, not knowing, you know, always in search of our identity.
Stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries and numerous other priorities of the American people. This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory. But I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant. And they should be very proud.
Yeah, so again, I don't put a lot of stock into what the corporation does. I put more stock into coming into my own, reclaiming all that was taken, because it's up in the air for grabs. You just have to be on the right wavelength. You have to tune your mind, ask for the truth about who we are, who you are. I just wonder how many people will hear something like this and feel sorry for or just think about it the wrong way, you know? I'm a firm believer that the truth has to be told regardless. If the truth isn't being told, it won't ever be right. No one will ever truly be happy. You will open up the door for the way that society is being operated right now. I think right now everybody's feeling a little something that I feel like my people in general collectively have normalized. I'm kind of proud, low-key, that for once we're not on the front lines of somebody else's battle. I think doing that slowly but surely will recognize just what kind of power we have. You know, I always quote my overhead projector theory. Being the soul of the body of humanity, if they can convince us or get us to speak it, see it, it'll usher into this paradigm. And that's why we've always been intermixed with certain movements, but we never tend to really benefit from any of it, really. I think everything that we are and where we are is based off of our ability to adapt and survive. I think this generation to come is ready to not only do that, but do it for a cause that will propel us forward and get us out of this state of servitude. Really, these are interesting times, to say the least. To be continued.